Hello there. A real treat for you today. Michael, a friend of mine, has exploded onto the Twitter scene over the past couple of weeks under the profile of TrekLad. TrekLad posts content of all things Star Trek with a special emphasis on the fans and the community. He's created a podcast series called Networking on Nimbus 3 where he chats with fans about the franchise and asked me to take part. You can find the series on all the main podcast providers, so whether you are a Spotify or an iTunes person, you'll be well catered for. TrekLad has given me special permission to share this with you here on JJ Model Making, so thank you very much, Michael. Links to both his Twitter account and his website can be found in the description below. So sit back, relax, and listen to two geeky friends chat about Star Trek and building scale plastic models.
Welcome to Networking on Nimbus 3, the paradise of the Star Trek podcasting universe. The mission of this podcast is to explore and understand more about the great people within our Star Trek fan community and learn about what they love about the great franchise. Hi there, I'm your host, Michael, aka the TrekLad, and thanks for joining me for another episode of the podcast. Today's guest is James, aka JJ Model Making. James considers himself a geeky all-rounder. He's a fan of a number of well-known fandoms, including Star Wars, the MCU, Game of Thrones, and of course Star Trek. James has amassed a considerable following on his YouTube and Instagram channels and has been wowing us for years with his array of incredible scale models. Welcome to the show, James. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Nice. My absolute pleasure. Obviously, people listening to this podcast won't know of yourself and they won't know of me particularly well at this point, but you know, we obviously go way back in the real world, having worked together for a number of years. So we've had lots of these kind of geeky classic conversations for a long time. So it's kind of cool to be doing this on a podcast. I'm sure you agree. Absolutely,
yes. I mean, I think we worked together for about 2 or 3 years, about 2 or 3 years ago now, if I remember correctly. We had lots of extremely geeky chats at lunchtime and probably at work as well. And swapped a few beers and stories and seen some films in the cinema and a movie night of another franchise, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember which franchise that was, but I'm sure we might talk about it at some point. But some great, really good memories with you, James, and really appreciate you joining me on this episode today. So just kind of go back to what we were, the mission of this podcast is to understand more about the members of the Star Trek fan community and to understand a little bit more about what got you into Star Trek and what your introduction was to Star Trek and more perhaps beyond that the wider kind of fandom community. So I want you to do your best here, James, and kind of take us back to your youth. I know it wasn't that long ago, take us back and what's your earliest memory of Star Trek and how did you come to love the franchise?
That's right. Well, I'll take you back. Cue some sort of rippling sound effect movies. So yeah, I mean, my first experience with Star Trek is just to give you a bit of background. I was born in the late 70s or 77, and I was lucky enough to live in America for 4 years between the years of 85 and 89. So from my point of view, I was sort of probably one of, I think you maybe describe as sort of the in-between generation of Star Trek. I remember Captain Kirk in Star Trek being on TV, as in I'd heard of it, never seen it. I remember it was on TV, especially in America, but it was on late at night, past my bedtime, and if I was staying up a bit late to sort of see these things. But my first proper experience, I remember, was when I was at my friend Eric's house. I can't remember his last name, but it was probably, you'll know better than me, I think it was the summer of 1987 when Star Trek The Next Generation came out. I remember we went around his house after school sharing a bowl of French fries, stroke chips, and saw this amazing thing on TV, and we both sat down, and I remember his mum came and said, "I've never heard you so quiet. What's going on?" And we were watching this amazingly graceful spaceship split into two with some English guy telling everyone what to do. Apparently that's the Enterprise, and his dad came in, that's not the Enterprise. But it's kind of blew our minds, really. And it started from there.
So you remember the very first episode. So your first memory of Star Trek is literally watching Encounter at Farpoint.
Basically, yeah. I think it's a bit like the James Bond films. You have a favourite Bond,
Yeah.
I think, my Star Trek is Captain Picard and the Enterprise D, having watched the very first one. I don't think I watched it religiously. I remember it was on funny times on the weekends, in the evenings and stuff. But I remember watching a few of them, and then fast forward a few years, we were living back in Berkshire in England at the time, and our family home in Maidenhead, and it was on. I think it was on Wednesday nights on BBC Two at about 6:45 at night. Um, so as I sort of got a bit older and a bit further along in school, we'd have dinner and stuff when we got home, and I would try and watch that before I started my homework. So it's, I can start my homework at 7:30. It's probably priorities, absolutely. But it's on Wednesdays. That was okay. That's up in my mum and dad's bedroom on their little TV. But that was sort of it. So I remember, I think it was it started from the beginning, and then like Friends, it went through a number of loops over the years. But yeah, definitely that was my first experience. I think that was my first intro into Star Trek. I remember watching that all the way through, and I think it finished in the summer of '94, if I remember. It was when I was doing my GCSEs, and I saved up my pocket money, and I was very delighted. I got a checkbook through in the post, and it was very exciting. I opened this whole new world of financial transactions for a 16-year-old kid, and I bought a Enterprise D model. But it was the one from the end of I think it's is it All Good Things, the very last episode of The Next Generation, the one with the 3 engines.
Oh yes.
So I remember, it had to it's terrifying sort of prospect. You've got to cut bits off your very expensive model and stick on new ones, and you had to use things like super glue, and I stuck my fingers together, and you have to paint it and all that sort of stuff. And that was really, really good. So I think I've got some photos of that tucked away on Instagram and stuff. But then I bought another one because I wasn't very happy with it. And I'm delighted to say I've still got it.
You do?
I do, yeah. So back in, God, what year is it now? 2014, I repainted it for its 20th anniversary.
Wow.
So I sort of stripped all the paint back, repainted it, and then got some proper decals and everything, and then gave the old girl a new lease of life. So yes, I've still got that actual model. So it's not my oldest model, I have to say, back in '94, but it's got a special place in my heart.
That's incredible, and I love the fact that usually when you ask somebody for their first memory of something, and they're very specific, it really is, that's their first memory, that's the first thing they remember.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the visual of the Enterprise splitting in two. I mean, I'm not sure if, obviously you'd watched Star Wars probably by that point, long before that point, so you probably had a love of spaceships and things like that long before this happened. But would you say that was the moment that you kind of went, you know what, I really love the ships from Star Trek, and I'm going to need to start modeling and buying these ships and creating them myself?
Absolutely, yeah. I think being a child of the late '70s, I sort of grew up more on Star Wars, and Star Wars had finished. We thought we'd never ever have another one at the end in the summer of '83. So it was sort of what was next, and Star Trek sort of not filled that gap, but sort of gave another avenue to look at. I think the shows are really good. I think it's quite great having a Shakespearean French/English actor as your captain. Probably come on to that a bit later. But it's the for me, it's more sort of the ships and the technology and the interpersonal goings on of the crew and the people they meet, as opposed to the overriding stories of the Next Generation. I think I quite like the original, the older ones, the first couple of seasons. I know that a lot of people say it takes a good few years to get going until the end of, is it season 3, the best of both worlds? That's sort of when everyone says it starts getting good. But I quite like the old ones. The one where they meet those, is it the Binars, who sort of try and take over the ship for various reasons, and that one where that young Will Wheaton meets that funny-looking character who makes the ship go stupidly fast. I like the crazy, outlandish ideas, because it's supposed to take you to a bad quote galaxy far, far away, wrong franchise, but you know what I mean, something that takes you away from the mundane normal life, or when you should be doing your homework, quite frankly.
On the Wednesday night, yeah.
On the Wednesday night, but I think I enjoyed that, and as models go, I'm sure a lot of people will probably agree or disagree, but they're not massively hard things to build. I've seen pictures of your own one. If you put your mind to it, you could build one in an afternoon quite happily.
Yeah.
They're not massively expensive. Save up for it, or put some money in a tin every month, and you have it all saved away. But yeah, they're quite good, and then you can build it quite quickly. You can paint it quite quickly, and then you think, yeah, that's great. What's next? But it's the ships. And the stories really, and it's fantastic that it's still going.
Oh yeah, really great. I mean, well, we've been very lucky the last few years. We've had the resurrection of a number of very famous franchises. Obviously, Star Wars being something that you really love, something that you really love, and it's something that I love as well. We were fortunate enough to get another trilogy of that. And obviously we've got new Star Trek on the horizon, lots of new Star Trek. We got lots of new Star Wars on the horizon as well. So very exciting for fans of both franchises. The thing that I always kind of feel about Star Wars and Star Trek, and I never really play them off against each other. I mean, I might joke about it every now and again, but at the end of the day, I was raised also on both Star Trek and Star Wars. That was my diet. So I would never really kind of go one over the other. I mean, I do obviously gravitate more towards Star Trek simply because I think that was the thing I was introduced to first, and then Star Wars. Star Wars wasn't around when I was a kid, and it wasn't until I was about 9 and Phantom Menace came out, and then I got into it. But the thing I always noticed, that the two differences in terms of the visual aspects, is that the vessels, the ships in Star Wars are always they're always a little bit more kind of like kind of cobbled together, and they have this kind of disjointed look, but there's like more kind of details in the models. There's more kind of like inner workings. Like if you look at the Millennium Falcon or like the Super Destroyer, there's lots of really intricate, tiny micro details on those models. And when you look at these ships from Star Trek, it did change a little bit with the Enterprise D, with the Aztec patterns and things like that, but it was still fairly simplistic. The vessels were sleeker and a little bit more simple in terms of the way that they were made up. Is that something that you noticed as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think let's try and put it in a good way. I think reading, I've read probably more Star Wars books than anyone should do in their life, really. But I think within the sort of the two universes, I think the key difference is in Star Trek is an evolution of what we could be today. You fast forward 300 or 350 years, whatever it is, with some breakthroughs in technology, we can evolve our technology, progress our technology, go out and explore the stars, and you can see. They've all got flaws. They have seats. There's sort of evolution of technology. That's something that we could aspire to, and something that could be done. Things like gravity and stuff has to be overcome and all that sort of stuff. But in the Star Wars universe, I'll come back to the ships in a sec. But I think within their universe and what they describe it as, the races out there have had technology to be able to explore the stars for something like 25,000 years.
Yeah.
So it's an older technology, and an older technology and more advanced technology means that you just think of like nuclear reactors today. They're not as big as they were 50 years ago. Things get smaller, phones especially. Things evolve, it becomes smaller and more compact. And as time goes by, you think of like. Imagine Star Trek spaceships are like cars. Every now and then you see some brand new cars, but then behind it you see that really old Ford Cortina that's about 50 years old and it's falling apart a bit. It's got a touch of class to it. But not to go too Star Warsy on the Star Trek podcast, but when they were building the models for Star Wars, they basically rustled up a load of model kits. There's some famous parts from like Sherman tanks, Second World War vehicles, battleships, this sort of stuff. Basically, they had to try and they had an overall design of what they wanted the ship to look like the Millennium Falcon, but then all the extra sort of greebles, they call them, little funny bits and things poking out, are basically bits of tank model kits that they stuck together. Yeah, I think a good example is the Y-wing fighter. You can find some fascinating websites out there. I'll try and send you some links afterwards if you want to share with the audience. But there's people out there who are beyond crazy in terms of sort of getting the amount of detail, like screen accurate, correct. I think the Y-wing is made up of 17 different model kits.
Wow.
And some of them have like one piece from that model. But if you buy all the pieces, and people cotton onto this and supply and demand, you end up paying an absolute fortune to make the model. But it's fascinating, and you think how many. It's almost like I think the ethos of Star Trek is, if the technology is advanced enough, you'd be able to repair the ship from the inside. You wouldn't have to go clambering around on the outside. Whereas Star Wars, it's the other way around. They land on planets. It's not going in space isn't as dangerous as it was, and they sort of wait to land. And Han Solo's always fixing it in the inside, admittedly, but it's always running around on the outside as well. So yeah, there's a whole myriad of differences. But I think it's sort of what we can progress to versus, like the bicycle wheel or a petrol combustion engine. Things evolve over time, and it becomes easier to do it and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you actually raised something that I had never actually considered, about the idea that Star Wars, the universe of Star Wars, is so far ahead in terms of their exploration of space. They're just kind of so they don't really have that same wonder of going through space. It's just like we need to get from here to there. So it's almost like in Star Wars, it's like getting in a car for them and just like hyperdrive, we're there. And they do explore that because essentially, Mos Eisley is like an airport. It's just like, oh, you want to go to space? Okay, yeah, it will cost you this much, thank you.
Yes.
But in Star Trek, in the future, we've only been going in these faster than light ships for a couple of hundred years. So there's still that kind of sense of wonder, and there's also that kind of in the back of their head kind of fear that things might go wrong. So yeah, it's really interesting that you raised that, because in Star Wars there's almost like this kind of like space exploration is just a thing, and space exploration in Star Trek is like the thing.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's sort of early 21st century example could be the electricity into your house. You don't know how it works. You don't really care how it works. If you plug something in and make sure the power's on and you paid your bill, it's going to work. Whereas 60 years ago, you're going to make sure if everything has got fuses. If you look at old computers, the original computers, they have vacuum tubes. You think of the technology that's evolved over time, and it's a much older, more mature technology-based universe. So it's not as new. I'm sure we'll probably get some debate in the comments for saying this, but I think that there's people who've done sort of speed test analysis, and you can get in Star Wars from one side of the galaxy to the other in 5 minutes, whereas Star Trek it would take 40 years and that sort of stuff, and one's got this and that over the other, and ultimately it's it's a TV show and a set of films. But
I think
it's interesting.
I think it makes perfect sense. I mean, you literally said it. In Star Wars, they've been traveling the cosmos for thousands and thousands of years. They will go faster. Guess what? I'm fine with that, and most people are fine with that as well, because they're two separate universes.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, so it's really, really interesting. I want to talk about your introduction to modeling, because obviously that's what you do, and that's what you're really well known for. And I speak for myself here when I say that I've seen some of your models, and I've literally, in fact, I don't speak for myself, because I shared some of your models on my Twitter, and people were like, this guy's amazing. Just some of the detail and the love. I think it's the love that I see in the models. The attention to detail does come from a place of love, and I think it's really, really cool to see. But you're so multifaceted in your approach to modeling as well. It's not just Star Trek models, it's Star Wars models, but also real life ships and things as well. But where did that all come from? How did that start?
Well, I think it's a bit of a timeline. I remember my very first model I ever built was a Luke Skywalker X-Wing, and I think it was about 1984. It wasn't long before we went to America. So I was, 6-year-old ginger-haired little lanky lad. I built it with my dad. It was great fun. I think I got it for my birthday or Christmas probably. We painted it all up on the kitchen table, with pots of paint everywhere. And, put this bit there, put that bit there. No, you're doing it wrong. That parents and families do together. But I always remember it sticks in my mind because we stuck Luke's arms on the wrong way round.
Oh,
So you
no.
imagine a torso, and then there's a left arm and a right arm attached to the shoulder. We did it the wrong way, so he's kind of doing a bit of a funky dance, which we obviously didn't notice until afterwards. But it's my model. I enjoyed it. I built it with my dad. It's great. It's absolutely fantastic. And then I built a few over the years when we were in America. I think I built I think it was Challenger space shuttle, because we watched the Challenger disaster live on TV when we were
Oh
out
my
there.
God.
That was one of my "Where were you" moments. So I built one in memory of that, and it was a horrible kit. It was quite big, and it was nothing. It was quite hard to make, and it was all white and excuse me. And anyone who's ever built models, painting white glossy paint is an absolute nightmare. It just can go everywhere, and it touches anything, it will stick to it. It's a nightmare. But when we came back, because I'm the oldest of three, my younger brother and a sister. So I don't have a big brother, but I've got three cousins, and my oldest cousin Julian, he had a model Bismarck. It's in what they call 1 to 350 scale. So they're quite big ships, and that's the sort of scale that I tend to build most of mine in now. But
Right.
it sort of blew my mind. It was, it's amazing the amount of detail involved in it. It's about 65, 70 centimeters long, and it's got hundreds of pieces, and you've got to paint it all the right way. And how do you paint the bottom without touching off the top and that sort of stuff. So every time we used to go, it was in the era when they didn't live too far away, so we used to go over at half term and have sleepovers at my auntie's house, and sleep downstairs and watch Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, eating crisps and stuff like you do when you're 13, and then looking at Julian's models. And then after that I sort of got back into modeling a bit more, and then built those Enterprises and a couple of the tanks and stuff after the first Gulf War. That's the oldest model I've still got. It's from 1991.
Wow. I was one.
You were what? That's right.
Sorry.
I've got a couple of years older. I'm a bit grayer. But then, went, did GCSEs and A levels and went to university, and sort of dropped off a bit after that. But then I got back into it after quite a few years, and I'm just trying to remember what the first one was. Yeah, I think I got a Bismarck for Christmas. I think it's about 2006, 7, something like that, which I've still got. It's brilliant to have. It's absolutely fantastic. And just the amount of detail that's involved, and you can get extra parts. It's called photo etch, which is sort of very thin brass metal pieces. So if you imagine like railings on a ship, just because of the limits of the molding process, you can't get the detail on some railings at that size.
Right.
Like an airplane is probably about 6 centimeters long, so it's quite hard to do railing. It's sort of no higher than a meter. So you buy all these extra bits, and it's sort of, yes, it's a bit more expensive, and you've got to learn new techniques and everything. But if you finish it and you learn, and you think, yeah, I made that. That's quite good. And then I thought, I'll only ever do this once. So I bought a aircraft carrier USS Enterprise. So it's one that's been,
it's a good name
now. Yeah, so I think it's a bit of a Star Trek thing there. So it served for something like best part of 60 years. It's the first nuclear powered aircraft carrier. It's a meter long. It's massive. It's really, really impressive. And then once you finish the kit, you go, oh yeah, I've got to put 60 different airplanes on it now as well. And they're all made up of 6 parts, and you've got to paint them and stick them together and add some decals and stuff. And then they turned into a really, really impressive piece. But then, kept going really. So over that, so I think I've got 18 warships now. They're all finished apart from one new aircraft carrier, and then in between all of those got some Star Wars stuff, some Star Destroyers and AT-AT, some Millennium Falcon, and then Iron Man stuff, quite good kits, and then a few basically toys. You imagine you're sort of buying in toy shops, and you can repaint them and add more detail and light them up and that sort of stuff. So it's kind of like a good way to sort of learn the craft. The amount of detail, and it does sort of take over things. I find it's quite therapeutic. You can't. I can't even listen to music when I'm doing it because it will distract you. You don't think about, how am I going to pay the mortgage this month, or work's really hard, or whatever. Got to go food shopping. You just can't think about it. So it's quite nice. Settle away for an hour or so. And you don't do it every night. An hour here, an hour there, half an hour on the weekend, that sort of stuff. But then you're coming back to the Star Trek stuff. And Star Trek there's ultimately not a lot of pieces to it. Generalizing here, but you think of any Star Trek kit. Generally, you've got a saucer section, a bit of a neck, and then 3 cylinders of various shapes and sizes. So it's easier to put that together. And, if you don't stick it all together, you can paint bits, and then put them on afterwards, that sort of stuff. But it's not to sort of belittle anyone's work, but they're generally easier to put together. And the detail is in the painting, basically, and the decals and stuff. So I enjoy doing that, and you can get through quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you literally just touched on it, and I was just going to go there. The painting and the decals, I guess, is where the challenge of Star Trek modeling comes in, because Star Wars, there aren't, to my knowledge anyway, ship registries and iconography isn't really that prevalent on Star Wars ships. I think I've seen maybe on the X-wings and the Y-wings there are kind of like rebellion kind of symbology and symbols and things like that on those ships, but Star Trek is very much more uniform designs, and the decals are a little bit more complex. Would that be fair to say?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, just that you touched on the X-wing in particular. I mean, yes, if you bought an X-wing today, it will probably come with the decals for the red stripes and the yellow bits and pieces, and then a few sort of insignias and markings and "do not stand here," that sort of stuff. A lot of people tend to find that the decals for the stripes aren't actually that good. I mean, you get to a certain point in model making, you get a better finish if you mask it off and spray paint it yourself. Right. But then some things like the rebel symbol, for instance, or "don't stand here," most people then use those decals. And then one thing I've sort of been playing around with during the lockdown actually is sort of printing your own decals. I'm quite fortunate. My sister's a graphic designer, so I'm like, sister, can you do this for me and bend that a bit and turn that over, that red? You make a model? No, it's fine. It's for someone. Yeah, you are. Okay, fine. And then you can print them out yourself. So I bought some decal paper, and you've got to put varnish on, that sort of stuff. But you're absolutely right. I think Star Trek ships are possibly going back to the history of the two universes. They're more off the production line, and they all have the same parts, and they've got this, you put the registry numbers on them and things around the phasers and lifeboats and this, that, and the other. And then some kits you can get, some of the ones I've built the last few months or so are actually covered in Aztec details, which is something that's sort of relatively new in terms of model kits. I think there's the Enterprise, the original Enterprise, the Constitution refit, which I'm sure you're very familiar with.
Yep.
The model is you basically stick it together, you paint it white, and then you put some varnish on it, and then you get sheets and sheets and sheets and sheets of Aztec details that basically sort of make up like the top and the bottom of the saucer, for instance. But you have to cut them into 8s and then put them on, and then there's all sorts of different techniques and slightly different model making decal solution, it's called, to soften the decal, so it sort of like pulls down onto the plastic, fits into all the different panel lines and the grid lines more, and then you put stuff on top to sort of to soften it so it sort of oozes over a little bit more. But I mean, water will do the same thing. It is ultimately, it's not quite as good, so don't let it ever put you off. But it's fascinating. It's a whole new world.
Yeah, so I reached out to you a while ago, and I said, I've got this model kit. I've had this model kit for ages. Laura bought it for me like 4 Christmases ago, and it's just been kind of collecting dust.
Oh, wow.
We just moved into our first house, and so very exciting. And I messaged you, and I said, look, I'm going to finally build it. And I really, really appreciated, the encouragement that you gave me. And as I showed you before we jumped on this, obviously I completed the initial assembly of it, and you're 100% right. The concentration, the kind of diversion that it gives you is wonderful, and I actually found myself becoming very positively addicted to the thrill of assembling the model. And I did listen to music. I had Star Trek music playing as I was, but yeah, I was kind of like, it was just Jerry Goldsmith's Enterprise reveal just on loop as I was slowly assembling this model. To see the whole thing, and I took pictures of the progress and posted them on Twitter and got some really good encouragement as well. But the thrill of just holding this model in my hand, and I'm doing so right now. It's a basic ship, yes, but the detail of it is quite remarkable. And just knowing that I put this together, and the fun that I had remembering putting it together. I did rush through it a little bit, so there are some imperfections, and the terrifying thing, the first thing that I cut out of the frame was the source section. And it's the first model I put together in about 15, 16 years. And I, again, based on your kind recommendations, I went and bought those wire clippers from Amazon. And I accidentally snipped a little bit in my haste, and I think I rushed it. It's not too bad. I think a little bit of putty can essentially smooth the thing out.
You can fix that, don't worry.
Yeah, it's just, but the thing is, I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on how much fun I had putting it together, and I really appreciate the support that you gave me. And it's something that I've noticed as well in the community, and I think it's one of the reasons why you've built up such a wonderful following on YouTube and Instagram is you're very supportive, and you're, I think, some modelers and some people that I've come across I'm not going to share the secrets of how I do this, and it's all a bit guarded, and it's like, why are you on the internet then? And I think that you go the alternate route, and you're there to support, and you're there to essentially say, look, I put this together. It was not the easiest thing, but I'm going to help you. And I think that's the best attitude to have, and I think you should be commended for that. The one thing that I also wanted to talk about was the fact that you so once you've assembled your model, once you've painted it, and once you've gone through the absolute wonderful, fun process of all of the decals, you tend to give your vessels different names to, like, so you don't call them all Enterprise. You call them different things. You use the alternative decals, which I find really interesting. And I know a couple of people have gone, "You've named your ship wrong," and you've gone, "No, I haven't. I've called it this for a reason." When you're doing that, are you putting together like a fictional kind of history of the ship, or is it just you just wanted to distinguish the ship as being something different?
It's a bit of both, really. I mean, everyone knows the Enterprises. It will take you 30 seconds. Everyone who's listening to this and goes onto YouTube and put scale model Enterprise. Hopefully mine will come up quite near the top. I'll have to
say. They will.
There's so many Enterprises, and I think it's just the hero ships. It's great, okay, it's Enterprise, but it's what's for me, it's sort of what's the paint job like? Is it what class of ship is it? There was a lot of people. I mean, a lot of the stuff I did. One in particular, I'm sort of leading around to do it is one I finished a couple of weeks ago actually, which is the USS Churchill, which might be the one you're referring to. So it's an ambassador class ship. So basically, this is a bit of a stay-at-home project. So I had basically a lot of these kits are up in the loft, the older ones, like the old Enterprise and stuff. They're up in the loft, and the Ambassador class Enterprise C is very expensive to buy. It's basically supply and demand. So Ertl, the company, used to make these kits. They stopped trading about 10 years ago, and they basically, the molds, like the original master packs, the details, got bought by a company called AMT, and they sort of started re-releasing stuff. So basically, it's the exact same kit, the exact same mold. It's just in a different box. Even at the newer Enterprise E, which I finished about a week ago, is it's a 1996 mold. It's just in a different box. So I was looking at all the things. I thought, well, I want something to do and getting a bit itchy feet. And I thought, well, I'd like to. I named it, actually, funny enough, that one, the USS Ambassador, not the Enterprise C. But so it's like, right, that's the first one. So okay, so I got the kit out and I thought, oh god, this is is it too much to do? But I thought, well, I don't want to spend £60 on a kit that I've already got. So I thought, right, I've got time. So yeah, stripped all the paint off, which is quite fun. Using all sorts of horrific chemicals and leaving it in the garage overnight and wearing gloves, and then you can scrape, if you leave it long enough, you can scrape the paint off with a toothbrush ultimately, or some sort of scouring pad. But this is sort of best part of 15, if not more, years of paint and dirt and God knows what, sitting in a box in the loft. But eventually got it all off. And then I thought, oh, well, I'm not sure what to call it. You can buy different registry numbers from a company in America called Federation Models. But with, the coronavirus and everything, the postage times are very, very slow. I mean, obviously, decals from model Starship aren't exactly on the priority list in anyone.
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay, so I thought, well, I'll try and sort of get that file. There's a great site which you're probably familiar with, I'm sure, because I think it's in Memory Alpha.
Yeah.
And sort of a bit of history. And I just noticed that there was one that was called the Churchill, and it was quite a high registry number, which is fine. But I really wanted to use. I've got some old decal sets, and I wanted to use the newer Star Trek pendants, like the 2 red stripes with the yellow arrowhead, as opposed to the older ones, which, funny enough, are on the Enterprise D.
Yep.
Basically, just trying to be thrifty as opposed to spending money. So I thought, come on, we can do this. So yeah, sort of just stripped it back and trying to paint it a bit newer, and then in part of the me taking off all the paint, I had to use a like a big wire brush for like cleaning barbecue. Some bits just wasn't covering off, and unfortunately, I sort of scratched it here and there, quite deep scratches. It was too hard to fill. So I thought, what do I do? What do I do? So I thought, no. So in my head, little backstory, it was in the Dominion War and it got rushed into service. So it's half finished. It doesn't need to be pretty. And there's some bits I haven't, because I thought, why on earth would anyone spend all that time painting the Enterprise C blue? I thought it was a bit overkill. Metal color, yeah, I can get. Some sort of coating, okay, fine. But there was some poor, I'm sure it's not, but some poor soul sitting on the top of a spaceship painting it with a brush. just didn't buy that. So I thought, let's call it the Ambassador. Use some spare decals from an old set for the lifeboats. Got hold of my sister and said, can you make a USS Churchill? I was, oh, not again. Love you. So she did that for me, and then called it that. So that was quite good. And then I made another one, which is the Excelsior class, but it's the old kit, which I managed to find a bit of a bargain on eBay. But I bought an extra set of these Aztec decals, and it had a couple of different names. So it had like I think it's the USS Hood, the Melbourne, and another one that escapes me. I thought, the Melbourne sounds quite nice. I remember that, and I thought, where's that from? And I think it's from the Best of Both Worlds. I think
it is. It's the ship that. Yep, you got it.
Yeah. So I thought, that's quite cool. Let's go with that. So it's just sort of just a little bit. Stand out. I mean, it's the same. Ultimately, it's exactly the same as the Excelsior. It's just with a different name, but it makes it yours, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that, and I think I've been looking at my own model kit and the decals. I'm kind of like, it'd be so easy to just call it the Enterprise, but I've got the Constitution, and I think I've got Yorktown as well. I can't remember off the top of my head, and I'm kind of like I'm a little inspired to call mine something a bit different, and I might even look online and see if there's something that I can call it to make it really uniquely mine. I love that approach. But one thing that you were talking about was the damage to the Ambassador, and I really enjoyed watching the process, because obviously I follow you on Instagram and YouTube, but it was on Instagram that you were posting almost daily updates on how that model was going, and I remember the visual of seeing this Ambassador class, because I think the Ambassador class is a gorgeous ship.
I like it too.
Yeah, you've basically got it like saucer down in this like bucket outside, and I was like, what's going on here? I honestly never seen that visual before, and was like, what is he doing? What's he up to? And then the updates of seeing it all come together, and the final, and I saw these kind of score lines, these damage lines in the vessel, and honestly, James, I thought that was just part of the model, because it was a yesterday's Enterprise, because it had just been in the battle at Narada 3. I think it's Narada 3. Okay. So I thought it was I thought that was part of the model. And I'm sure people who were following probably also thought the same thing as well.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
But do you know what? I absolutely love the optimism and just being just upbeat about it. Yes, I've accidentally kind of scored in some damaged lines, through some scrubbing. But you know what? I can use that and actually add to the kind of nature of the model, I can put that in as part of its story, as in it was in the Dominion War and they didn't want to go outside and paint it up, so it's just one of those kind of third line ships in the fleet. I think that speaks volumes of your creativity and resourcefulness. And also, I think there would be some modelers out there that might give up if they accidentally did that to their model. Hopefully, if anybody's listening to this and has kind of had that moment where they've accidentally damaged some of their models, like myself with accidentally, clipping out a little bit of the saucer, maybe I can use that as part of the character of the model.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, that's very kind of you to say, first of all. But I think, there is no harm in getting it wrong. I think, if anything, that's how you learn and get better. Sure, anyone can build an enterprise, and my sort of just going back to what you were saying earlier about sort of being supportive of everything. I mean, up until honestly about 15 years ago, the only person I've ever known who made models was my cousin, that Bismarck.
Right.
And went on YouTube, and people, oh wow, this is amazing. And there's some people out there who make my enterprise look like I did it in the dark with my eyes closed. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And having built it yourself, I get to the point where I don't have the motor control. I don't think, just physically can't do what they do. So, it's good to share. And my sort of ethos behind all the channel, everything is that it's, if I can do it, you can do it. I've been doing it a bit longer. I've done some mistakes. I've learned a few things along the way. But if you just start, if you want to have a go at it, just start. There's no, you can swat up on techniques and ask questions and do your research, but ultimately you need to get that box open, cut the plastic off, and start gluing it together. And if you do snip a bit off the saucer of your enterprise, what's the worst that can happen? Well, do you think, well, you can either get a new model, or you think, right, okay, well, what do other people do? You can get some model filler, which is like £4 for a tube. It will last you 5 years. You put it on, you get some sanding sticks, you leave it to dry for a day, go to work, come back the next day, you sand it off. Once you paint it, you'd never know. You literally never know.
Yeah, I was gonna. I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask you at some point was, to kind of go into how JJ model making has kind of blown up to the scale it has it has on YouTube. But I don't really feel like I need to. I think you've kind of answered it really. The attitude and the approach that you take as being, hey, I'm James. I'm a model maker. I've been a model maker for years. But I'm, this is what I do and this is what I love doing. And I think that is one of the reasons why you've been able to connect with so many people. Because you are just, yourself, and you kind of don't really make, I make mistakes, but this is how I correct them, and you can do the same thing as well. So I think that encouragement has really helped push your channel to new heights.
Oh, great! That's very kind. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just that, just have a go. There's no harm. I mean, my daughter's got involved with it. She knows Daddy making models all of her life. She's got a very in her bedroom. Next time you come round, I'll show you. In her bedroom, she's got a Millennium Falcon and an X-wing hanging from the ceiling that we built together. So she's very proud of those, and she wakes up to see those every morning. But I think it's it's just having a go. I mean, there's no secret really. I think it's if you don't know, YouTube is an unbelievable resource for people. There's countless Facebook groups. There's Instagram. There's magazines, and generally everyone's really nice. I mean, I think a good little thing of how kind the community is I got the Enterprise from the J.J. Abrams Star Trek film. Whenever that came out, I can't quite remember now, but
2009.
2009. There you go. It's great. It's quite big. I didn't do the Aztecing because I was a bit nervous about that one, but what I noticed when I opened it is it was missing a part, which is very unusual. It never ever happened before. So I thought, well, what do I do? And I bought it off Amazon, and they're like, well, basically we post you the box. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm not blaming you, but who do I speak to? And I was kind of scratching my head for a week or so, and then went on Facebook and became a member of a couple of groups. And is anyone so I basically said, can anyone help? I've got this problem. Part was missing. It's the the plastic so it's a clear plastic piece that goes right at the front of the deflector, so you'll notice it.
Oh, right, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's not an antenna on an aircraft carrier that only I would notice. It's quite a prominent piece. What do I do? And they said, well, there's two options really. You can sort of get hold of Revel in Germany, and you have to sort of prove that you've bought it, and they might be able to send you a replacement part or replacement sprue. And I was like, well, I got it for a birthday present. I don't know if my sister's got the receipt. And then this guy goes, look, I had one. I broke it. I'll send it to you. Like, sorry? No, he said, I live up in Birmingham. If you can wait, I'm coming past Buckinghamshire a week on Saturday. I'll drop it round your house. I was like, you're kidding me? But no, that's fine. I'm not going. It's just going to sit in the garage. I'm not going to do anything with it. You might as well have, give it to someone who's going to use it, sort of thing. So there's nice people out there.
I mean, yes, that's such a lovely story, and yes, I think in this kind of day and age where people tend to focus on the negative stuff, there are nice people out there. There are people that are willing to support you and help you, even if they don't know you. And that's something that I've definitely noticed over the last couple of weeks of kind of rejoining and being a part of the Star Trek community anyway in that area. But I'm sure you have plenty of other stories of support from the model making community and other fandom communities. It's just need to focus on the positives and kind of ignore the people that maybe want to bring some negativity your way. But quickly want to kind of talk about the Eagle Moss models because that's a fun thing, and obviously that's something else. I mean, you've had a big part in bringing me into this kind of love of models and things, because I mean I loved models when I was a kid, but then I stopped being a kid, and then I started collecting Warhammer models and Games Workshop stuff, mainly the Lord of the Rings stuff. But then I'll very crudely say that I discovered the opposite sex and kind of abandoned all of that stuff.
I know exactly what you mean.
But when we started working together a few years ago, you did something that was so kind, and I think I was having a really bad time at work. And you noticed, and you actually bought in a spare Enterprise D Eagle Moss model that you had, and you gave it to me. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I mean, obviously we were good friends at that point, but kind of getting given something like that, really took me back, and it's right next to me right now. It's always next to it's. So I have lots of models now from the Eagle Moss collection, but the Enterprise D, because you gave it to me, it means a lot to me. So it's right next to my monitor, and I mean it's also the most gorgeous Star Trek ship in my opinion as well, the D. So there's that as well. But I remember being so grateful, and it really launched my love of that collection. And obviously I've had all sorts of fun with broken Defiant models and things like that.
Defiant saga of
just,
2017.
Oh my goodness, yeah. But no, I mean, what I mean, I know that you have some in your collection as well. But what are your thoughts on what Eagle Moss are doing and the detail of those models?
I think they're really good. I mean, it's model making is an interesting sort of funny. I'm quite fortunate at home. I've got my own little daddy's man cave, as it's called, and I've got a couple of big bookshelves. But some of these naval ships are quite big pieces, as you can imagine. But I think the Eagle Moss kits are fantastic size, if nothing else. You can have a good collection. And I think they're not to scale. Some people are fascinated with having the same scale of ships. I think it's 1 to 1400 it's called, which is the Enterprise D. So there's lots of kits that are that scale.
Right.
Some are plastic and some are resin. But I don't think it's a massive problem at all that Eagle Moss have. They're just sort of like palm size, for want of a better term, which I think is really good. I think it's quite thrifty and good having sort of some plastic, some die cast bits. I think the only thing that lets them down is a bit of quality control issues. I think I know there's some channels like I think it's Irish Trekkie who sort of basically got every one you can ever get, and he says the same sort of thing. There's some of them have got decals and some of them have got windows lined up and stuff, but they literally miss the windows. In some, we're talking millimeters, and some, like half a centimeter sort of stuff. Is that the end of the world? No, not really. You can. I haven't, although I am thinking about it. Your first YouTube post made me think of it. Is you can repaint them. There's people on eBay especially who can offer you different registry decals if you so wanted. So you can, anything you do scrape off, you can put back if you want. But no, I think they're great. I think they may be a bit too pricey for what they are, maybe. But if you're desperate to get one, I'd say look on eBay. I bought all of mine on eBay and just sort of a bit of a safe search on auction only. I've got some of the magazines. I'm not desperate, for them. I think it's just more like the ships, to be honest.
Yeah.
You can always look up stuff afterwards. But I think they're a great introduction. They look good on a desk, shelf, work, desk at work, wherever you want to put them, really. Sitting in the car with you, flying through traffic. I think it's a really, really good, worthwhile thing.
Yeah, I'm hopefully gonna be looking to expand on my collection. I do have the Irish Trekkie, Damien the Irish Trekkie, lined up as a guest for a future episode, which I'm really excited about. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be able to talk about the Eagle Moss collection at length. But so I'm quite excited for that. But yeah, also excited for to add some more to my collection. But I think you're right. I think I like the palm size. And I've got my own man cave now, which I'm really grateful for. But I'm still fairly limited for space. I've had a couple of people reach out to me on Twitter and say, "Oh, go for that cabinet, and that'll be a good cabinet to use to store in." But yeah, I mean, one thing at a time at the moment. We've just moved into this house, but eventually we'll be able to have them all proudly displayed, and I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully, we'll be able to have something maybe as awesome as the wonderful array of models that you have behind you. But awesome. Well,
Golden Goose. What's the one you'd like the most?
Well, I've got the one that I wanted the most. So I went and spent above the odds on the refit Enterprise. So I may have told a little bit of a porky. I love the Enterprise D. It's proudly displayed in my desk on my desk. But the refitted Enterprise from the TOS movies is hands down my favorite. It's just, I don't know what it's. I think it's because it's such a massive part of my childhood. I love that model. I love the kind of rectangular nacelles. It's just a really different look that they never kind of went back to. The Wrath of Khan's my favorite Star Trek film, so it's kind of like prominent in that. I love that ship, and I went and spent like 65 quid on this palm-sized model, and do you know what? I don't regret it. I don't regret it at all. I wanted it. I had the money. So I went and got it. But other than that, my second favorite, other than the Enterprise D, is probably the Bird of Prey, the Klingon Bird of Prey.
Okay.
Again, another memory, the Search of Spock, the face off of the refit Enterprise, and the Bird of Prey is just an iconic visual for me, and I love that ship.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yes, before we move on to the future of Star Trek, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you, James. But for any kind of aspiring modeler, or for any modeler that's maybe hit a wall with their current project, do you have maybe free tips and recommendations that you might be able to share now?
Yeah, I think probably the first, well, there's two things. Is you have to be interested in what you're building. It has to mean something to you. I think if you don't like building cars and you bought a car, why are you doing that? I think you have to really want to build what you're doing, because you can tell if someone's loved doing it as opposed to just building it.
Right.
So really, there's models for pretty much anything you possibly want. So choose something that means something to you. And I think maybe I lie. There's three things. The second thing is the tools and bits and pieces you need. And you said we've had a few chats and stuff over the last couple of weeks. Yes, it does take money to buy all the necessary bits. That's, I'm not going to lie to anyone there. But what I've always said to people is just spread the cost out over a couple of months. You think, right, I want to build a model. Fine, build the model that you want. Or start saving up to it. And then you need some glue. But okay, you buy it once, it will last you years. Some bits and pieces, some clippers, some sanding sticks, and tweezers, that sort of stuff. But it's always worth investing in a decent set of equipment. So you don't buy a set of tweezers just because they're 99p, because they probably are rubbish. If you spend a decent amount, like it could be £10. I'm not sure how much things are these days, I have to admit. But I've had the same set of tweezers, dropped, they've gone down the back of the desk, a bit bent, but I know if I hold it the right way, it works. So don't be afraid of that. Just sort of spread things out. And then, the third thing is don't be afraid to make mistakes. You'll learn another way not to do something.
Amazing. Well, there you go, model makers. Free tips from the absolute master himself. Thank you, James. So moving on to, as I said, the future of Star Trek. So yesterday we were graced with some wonderful news that CBS All Access has ordered Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So we have that's coming probably late 2021. We've got Star Trek Discovery Season 3, which is currently in post-production. We've got Star Trek Picard Season 2 that's been ordered. We've got the Lower Deck show. We've got Section 31 that's rumored. We've got, wow, so much. We've got the Nickelodeon animation. We've got still the rumors of a fourth Kelvin Star Trek movie. There's so much Star Trek on the horizon. And, for Star Wars as well, new projects being announced all the time. Specifically for Star Trek at the moment, what are your thoughts on the franchise going forward? And, are you excited for what's to come?
I am excited. I think it's a very exciting time to be a fan, that's for sure. I enjoyed Discovery. I think the new season, the first season. It's been a while since I sort of watched the newer Star Trek. But I thought, it's good. I'll watch that. Carried on through to the end. The second season was good. I think it's interesting as opposed to sort of your weekly or 2-part episodes, having one underlying arc with a few let's go off here, let's go off there, was sort of quite good. But I had less of a personal connection with basically the Discovery crew, but it was Captain Pike and Spock and his epic beard, and basically it was the Enterprise. I think Captain I can't remember his name now. Captain Pike was his real name. Anton Mount. I think I did tweet him actually at some point. I said I think I just watched. I listened to an audiobook. I'm a big Audible fan. After the first season came out, I think it was. But no, I really enjoyed season 2, so I'm looking forward to that. Enjoyed Picard. I think the only note I'd say on that, I thought it took a bit too long to get going. A little bit. I sort of like, come on, you've only got 8 episodes or whatever it was. I felt it was a little bit rushed, the ending, but it was great. It was great to see everyone. They're, as I said right at the start, they're kind of my crew, as it were. And lots of cool ships that you might get models for, which is very exciting. I think the only thing that I would say is I think they just need to be a little bit careful and not do a Star Wars and try and put everything out too much too soon. I think just hold down. I know things have been a bit delayed with the coronavirus and everything, but we don't need to have 2 new shows every year like clockwork. I think just take your time, get it right, as opposed to get it out, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I agree completely. I think they're in a good position right now that they can stagger releases and maybe, I mean, the animated shows, I think they can run them concurrently. But the live action stuff, Discovery, Picard, Strange New World, Section 31, if that comes, try and find a way to stagger them. And, I've got this at the moment with this podcast. I've had so many wonderful, great conversations with so many great guests. I've got so many booked in and coming up. I kind of want to release them all at the same time. But if you do that, you kind of dilute the show and not everyone's going to listen to it all. So so we're having this conversation on May 16th, but the chances are that this won't be out until maybe early June. So but I want to do that because I want to make sure that if I was to release this along with everyone else, it's going to get lost. And I think the same needs to be done with Star Trek. The same needs to be done with Star Wars. The same needs to be done with any studio that is making a lot of content at the moment. But I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, but I think it's very exciting. Obviously, there was a time when you think we wouldn't get any new shows. But I think it's just we've seen how it can go a bit off the rails. Like the DC cinematic films. I think they tried to do a Marvel and go straight to the Avengers, and I don't think it really worked. No. and I think Star Trek can learn a bit from Star Wars. Just you don't need a film about, show about everything.
No.
And is it better to put all your efforts into one as opposed to two B minuses?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I mentioned to a previous guest on this show is the idea of utilizing learning from Star Wars, what they're doing at the moment, and a piece of media that they've put out recently that I'm watching at the moment and I absolutely love is The Mandalorian. And
very much.
What I love about that is, I mean, beyond the fact that it looks so inherently Star Wars, is it's episodic in nature, but there is a larger arc that's almost dangling over their heads, almost like it reminds me actually a little bit of Doctor Who, the early rebooted Doctor Who, where they would have these different adventures, but there'd be like Bad Wolf kind of like lingering over.
Exactly.
And yeah, they announced Strange New Worlds as being this kind of return to an older way of Star Trek, which I think has gotten some people excited, but there's also a little bit of confusion. What does that mean? I think a lot of people are assuming that means episodic, but I think that The Mandalorian has proven you can do episodic, but you can also still tie into a larger overall arc.
Yeah, definitely. I think, if anything, I think that Discovery Season 2, I think having one main theme throughout, correct me if I'm wrong, 14, maybe more episodes, probably a bit long. I think maybe sort of 2, 3, 4 max that are connected, and then just a funny one, a bit of a standalone, just run around, save the day sort of thing, maybe the better way. But it's either way, it's exciting times, isn't it? You can't really complain.
Definitely. And I think the exciting thing is there are going to be a new legion, a new generation of model enthusiasts that are going to watch these shows, and they're going to go, oh, I really like the look of that model, and I'm gonna have a go at building it. And if they're in any doubt as to what they can do, they've obviously got a really good channel and resource in you to go to. So I think the future's in safe hands.
I think you're absolutely right.
Awesome. Well, James, we're at the end of the show, and I want to subject you to the infamous networking on Nimbus free quickfire round.
Quickfire round, okay.
I've not got any questions in front of me at the moment, and we've not. I've not kind of given you any time to prepare for these, so we'll just see how we do. No pressure whatsoever. Are you ready?
I am ready, sir.
Your favorite ever episode of Star Trek?
Probably, is it When No One Has Gone Before? I think it's called. When is it the Traveller makes the Enterprise go stupid fast?
Yes.
I think that's the name. I can't remember if that's the exact name, but yeah, I thought it was hilarity, but good fun, a good space adventure episode.
I love that pick so much, and that actually found its way into my top 10 favorite TNG episodes. So you're not alone in loving that episode. If you could take your soul and put it into any Star Trek ship in the universe, what would it be?
Any Star Trek ship I'd want to be. Can I give you a class? I think the Excelsior class. I think it's an old girl, but she's reliable. She's been through a lot and keeps on going. I think yes. I couldn't. Let's go with the Melbourne. It came to a sticky end, but I think it's sort of a reliable workhorse ship. It's always there for you.
Nice. What's your favourite memory from a Star Trek film?
Favorite memory, I think. Favorite memory would be watching the voyage home right at the start when they have that dedication to the Challenger crew.
Yes.
Because I watched it on TV, watched it live in the classroom.
I can't even imagine what that must have been like. I mean, I had the 9/11 disaster, also terrible, but the Challenger, my goodness. But I love the tribute at the beginning of the voyage home. I think it was very fitting, very lovely. That's a lovely moment. Thank you, James. Next, who would win in a fight between a Star Destroyer, and the... No, I'm joking. I'm not going to pit the two. If you could be a Star Trek character, so if you could basically take yourself and go into any Star Trek character for a day, who would it be?
Geordie LaForge, probably. Because I like knowing how things tick.
Nice. That's a good one. And final question. So Star Trek, there's so much of it, so many shows, so many amazing moments, so many iconic moments, so many movies, so many things to come. Years and years and years of lore, years of adventures. How would you sum up Star Trek in one word?
Aspirational.
Nice. That's a lovely way to end the show. Well, James, thank you so much for joining me on this special episode of Networking on Nimbus Free.
Thank you for having me.
No, pleasure. Is there anything you'd like to say, and where can people find you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say a big thank you for you. You've done Herculean amount of work. My phone is constantly lighting up with all of your exploits on Twitters, and I think you're doing a tremendous job. And I know I'm not the only person that's going to say that. So keep doing what you're doing. You can tell you definitely love it. So pat on the back to you, sir.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think I don't use Twitter as much as you. But JJ Model Making started off on YouTube, so you can search for that pretty easily, and I'm also on Facebook. I was like, oh yeah, you can do that as well. So yeah, that's all quite clear. I think YouTube is better for some aspects of interacting with viewers and subscribers and everything, and Facebook is better for other things. But then also relatively new. I've only been doing it honestly since lockdown, basically, is Instagram as well, and yeah, sort of ticked over 1,000 followers on that last weekend, which is ridiculous. There's a lot of people who've clearly got a bit of free time on their hands, but yeah, all the usual stuff. But yeah, JJ Model Making. But it's not about views and subscribers and counts and anything like that. I think it's just sharing a love of making models, getting your hands stuck together and trying to find that little bit you dropped on the floor and the carpet monster eats up, and that I made this feeling. So yeah, it's exciting little hobby. Everyone needs a hobby, I think, whatever that is: running, reading, watching movies. I enjoy it because my day job is basically office based. I spend most of my time in meetings or typing, so I don't get to spend much time making anything tangible. So it's using my hands I quite like, and some of the bits are quite fiddly and painty and everything, but I enjoy that sort of tactile personal connection experience with things.
Absolutely, and I think your work speaks for itself, and the community that you've amassed is absolutely incredible, and I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to join me today. So thank you very much, James.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And a big thank you to you for joining us for another episode of Networking on Nimbus Free. I hope you can join for future episodes. Consider subscribing on the platform that you're listening to this on. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at TrekLad. And one final thing before we go, obviously, as mentioned on the show, if you are struggling with anything right now because of isolation due to COVID-19 and you need anyone to talk to, my DMs are always open. If you're a modeler and you've kind of hit that snag, obviously, please reach out to James. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to help. And, the Star Trek Twitter community, the Star Trek internet community, and generally the fandom community on the internet are a wonderful bunch if you find the right part anyway. But, we're always here for you. If you need anything, please consider reaching out. Take care of yourself, and until next time, live long and prosper.